This video is not intended to encourage or glorify any kind of drug use. The sole purpose of these videos is to educate you on the dangers of what these substances can do to you. Please do not do any of the acts mentioned in this video. I repeat, do not do any of the acts mentioned in this video.
Welcome to the world of Tales from the Trip.
Since most of you probably don't know what vk-2C-B is, let me explain from Wikipedia. It is a designer drug. More specifically, it is the beta-keto analog of the controlled substance 2C-B, which was first synthesized by Alexander Shulgin. It is unknown who first synthesized vk-2C-B, but it first appeared on the market mid-2013 as a recreational drug. Although a synthesis of the compound had previously been described, in the years after its emergence on the market, papers reporting analytical characterizations of the substance appeared. It is offered online and is termed a psychedelic drug. Since October 12, 2016, vk-2C-B has become a controlled substance, Schedule 3 in Canada. It is also illegal in Germany, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom. vk-2C-B is a substituted phenethylamine. It features methoxy substituents at the 2 and 5 position on the ring, as well as the bromine at the 4 position. A ketone group is present at the beta position from the functional amine group connected to the alpha carbon, giving rise to its name, indicating it being a structural analog of 2C-B. Because of the ketone functional group, it is correctly referred to as a ketophenethylamine. It has been mistakenly referred to as a substituted cathinone. However, cathinones by definition are ketoamphetamines, and vk-2C-B is not an amphetamine. My experience with vk-2C-B happened during one of the rougher periods of my life. While studying at university, I've been struggling to keep up with responsibilities and my own personal issues. In order to deal with the stress and unhappiness that comes with financial issues, losing friends, abusive exes, etc., I'd been drinking about 1 liter of vodka a day for 3 months preceding this experience. I had only gotten into drugs about 1 year before this experience. It was only occasional use initially, but then the frequency of my use had increased to maybe twice a month and also trying loads of different drugs. Working at a nightclub and simultaneously studying at university gives rise to me being very tired all the time. Just before this trip, I hadn't slept for 1.5 days or eaten for a day or so. The experience began on a Saturday at 4 a.m. 4 friends and I, after finishing a decent shift at work, went back with P to his house. We regularly go back to someone's for drinking and hanging out at this time. Arriving around 5, we began drinking. I had my faithful liter bottle of vodka with me. The others had their own alcohol, which we all shared. Between 6 and 7, R took some of P's MDMA and started rolling, followed by Q, who also took some MDMA for her first time. We did the usual, being ridiculous with each other, listening to music, chatting, laughing, the usual. Then I asked P for some MDMA and did a 0.2 gram line. Pretty quickly I was rolling with R and Q. Our situation became classic for that of an entactogen. We were hugging, very nice things were said, chatting absolute quality high-grade shit. Eventually we looked out the window and the sun had risen, suggesting we ought to look at the time. It was 1 p.m. After a cigarette, we purchased more alcohol, went to my house, and grabbed a few things. One of our friends left around this point. The remaining returned to P's, whose housemates were very irritated with the noise we had been making. Took vk-2C-B here. P, R, and I then took some amphetamine to help stay awake at some time in the early afternoon while Q slept. I had 0.1 grams in a bomb and took it without fluid. Content with the buzz we felt, the chilling continued for an hour or so. I can't remember whose idea it was, ours or mine, to take some vk-2C-B next. However, R then took a 0.1 gram bomb of vk-2C-B with water. He turned to offer me the water, but I had already taken my .14 gram bomb without anything. Side note, apparently BK-2C-B forms inactive dimers in water/alkali solutions, so this may explain why R didn't trip, according to online sources. The rest of the day was entirely devoted to silliness. I wasn't paying attention to the effects of the BK-2C-B, which we called B-Cath, and before I knew it, we were taking a second bomb of it, each that R had prepared containing 60 to 80 milligrams. So I had taken somewhere around 0.2 to 0.22 grams of BK-2C-B, a research chemical of which nothing is known about other than what has been gained from subjective reports of effects, like this one. I started tripping balls and having a nice time. We were picking up objects and pretending they were phones to each other from across the room, addressing each other as doctor, followed by the name of the object they were using as a phone. Imaginary medical conditions were flung around the room, and they were urgently referred higher to Dr. Ceiling. Perception of my surroundings changed as everything began breathing and colors were much brighter. Thought processes were quite disjointed and fast-moving. Ridiculous quotes started being uttered. For the rest of the day, I was incapable of saying anything normal. Not that unusual for me, to be honest. For quite a long stretch of time, I was on R's back as we wandered around outside, and everyone started referring to me as Tabitha, my issued nickname. Someone came into one of those houses next door with their bike to see me tripping balls on R's back. I greeted him by saying, "Hello there, I'm the ostrich," whilst I was whispering into R's ear about how P is actually a robot. I went in for a shower. During this time, Q had woken up. I ended up sat on P's bed and only a towel next to Q, who turned to me asking, "Tabby, why are we naked?" followed by a search for our clothes and getting dressed in the other room. Effects of the BK-2C-B became more apparent once back in P's room. It was cold outside. It must have been around 4:30 at this point. My pupils had been fully dilated for a long time. I was sat in a chair gazing at R. He's slim, tall, and has really nice, medium-length black, side-fringed hair. I began to see tracers. These tracers were of R's face and arm mostly, seeing fairly short-lasting multicolored imprints of him left behind on a canvas-like background as he moved. Someone, I'm unsure as to whom, took their hat off and sat down in a funny way, leading to R and me coining the phrase "hatting out." We were all just sat around, hatting out. Over the course of the next few hours, I began getting worked up as we had shifts that evening, earliest of which was mine. None of us had slept or eaten, and we were on drugs. Well, I was the only one on anything really considerable at this point. R spent the next few hours trying to get me work ready as I began to freak out. Shivers go down my spine even as I type this because of the anxiety I felt due to the thought of losing my job, which I absolutely love. Q and R left, so P and I tried a nap before work. I had such intense closed-eye visuals of indescribable mosaic art that appeared to be growing, accompanied by auditory hallucinations of creaking wood. After an unspecified amount of time, I gave up on sleep. P got up with me. I had no shoes on, and it was raining outside in the pitch-black darkness. P lent me some shoes that were far too big. I was sick, and then P joined me to go back to my house. Unfortunately, all three of my housemates that I keep my lifestyle a secret from were in the only communal area. I am also very paranoid and anxious in my house on a normal day, let alone just before work whilst I'm tripping balls, and don't want them to know about it. People's faces looked as if the computer program Fun Photo Booth effects were being applied onto them in real life. For example, the faces were curling in on themselves and moving around with the motion of a lava lamp. Streams of colors flowed like rivers in the background. I hallucinated that people who weren't in the room were sat next to me, talking. I was so paranoid that I thought they had a routine scheduled for when I bring a friend into the house. I genuinely believed they were carrying out this rehearsed routine in front of me, when in reality they were all sat around talking and making dinner. P left. One of the housemates went upstairs and I couldn't handle what was happening. I started crying. I didn't want to lose my job. I told them about some general issues that were occurring in my life, then was cut short as I had to leave for work. On the way to the bus stop, I changed my mind as I didn't even recognize my own neighborhood. My housemates kindly called work for me, who demanded to speak to me. I pleaded with work, saying I was ill through tears, but was told I had to be in, so I agreed to try and help. They asked me to message when I was on my way, which I couldn't even do as my phone and laptop were broken and I had lost my wallet. Yes, my life was a bit of a mess. Again, I changed my mind on the way to the bus stop because I didn't want to get in trouble with the law. This is where the trip becomes nightmarish. I become so paranoid and delusional about the law getting involved. I was so fucked that I couldn't form sentences, find the light switch in my bedroom, or even put a jumper on. Convinced that I would lose my job and that the law was going to catch up with me, I frantically tried to come up with a solution to the problem. The housemates came in to find me crouching in my washing basket, topless, skinny jeans halfway off, still had underwear on luckily, while I was skitzing out. Closest of my housemates, S, clothed me. I was so far gone. I turned to them, tears running down my face, having a nervous breakdown, and said, "It's game over. There's only one way out." As I thought I was going to ruin their lives by losing them the house and getting everyone kicked off of their university courses. Completely delusional. This carried on for about an hour. I then attempted an escape to jump in front of a car on the main road. Fortunately, the housemates stopped me from killing myself by disallowing me to leave my room. Since I had just announced I was suicidal in that moment, an ambulance was called by a housemate who had clocked that I was on drugs. Paramedics came in, and the other two housemates, being innocently naive as they are, bless, were only then realizing that I was on drugs, tripping balls. The paramedics proceeded to raid my room, finding all my hospital forms and illicit drugs. They took a sample of my blood and detected amphetamine, MDMA, MDA, ketamine, vk-2C-B, plus a few others. So obviously, the sources of our drugs were not producing pure powders. The effects of the drugs and aversive situation became far too overwhelming at this point. I was unable to speak or walk and got strapped into some unidentifiable contraption as the tripping was so intense I couldn't recognize anything. Forgetting what my face looked like, unable to think, I just waited as from my perspective, everything was brought to me. Being carried from the ambulance into the waiting room of the hospital, I was left leaning on S's shoulder. For the next couple of hours, I couldn't think or speak, and I had a bad case of tinnitus, as well as an extremely high, uncomfortable body load. There is a block of memory missing for I don't know how long at this point. While I was out of it in the waiting room, all I heard was a short, looped conversation where a few of my friends' voices were talking about me in the background. S was the only friend with me. The voices were saying that all Tabs does is drugs, they have no interest in anything else, that kind of thing. Hours whilst in this state passed, I felt like I was never going to return from the trip. S started singing to me. After about an hour or so, I picked up on it and sung a lyric or two back at her. Then my fingers were the point of focus, so S tried to deduce what I was trying to say. Eventually, I started saying hi back to her when she waved at me. A depressing moment was when I turned to her and, with my voice that was messed up from a cold and all the alcohol, asked her, "S, will this ever end?" Each time I looked away and looked back at her, I perceived a completely different person being sat next to me. After a while, I regained my ability to speak and I managed to get up. I was back in the room. Following my regained ability to move, I wandered around the wards and waiting rooms with one shoe on, trying to talk and joke around with the staff and other patients as if they were on drugs too. Normally, I'm an incessant chatterbox, so I had a lot of not talking time to make up for. I was taken into several rooms, but tripping too hard still to be of any use to any available medical professionals. My heart and blood pressure were scanned a few times. In the waiting room on my chair, next to a wall, I hallucinated a person opening a door right next to me. Streams of colors were still flowing, as well as cloud-like outlines of colors floating in the air as a vapor. They were almost tangible. After 5 hours of me chatting shit, a group of big, angry goth girls got very irritated with me. I'm quite skinny, and any one of them could have beaten the shit out of me on a good day, let alone when I had overdosed, not eaten or slept in days. I was on the verge of throwing up. They threatened to punch me and beat me up, at which point security came over to sort it out, which was good because if I had received a punch, I would have immediately vomited. There was also a group of guys, roughly my age range, 18 to 20, who were there because one of their friends had tripped over and knocked themselves out. They were on ketamine and were asking how much I had taken to be in my state. I even chatted to them about why I was there and my issues, to which he replied saying, "It's okay, no one cares." He then started hitting on me. S had definitely had enough and asked me to sit next to her, so I put all that on hold. Expending all my energy being ridiculous in the waiting rooms left me incredibly weak. That and my arms were in pain from all the needles. I had to ask S to lift a cup of water to my mouth to hydrate me because I was so thirsty. I was so thankful for everything she did. I was as pale as a ghost, my lips were so blue, and my pupils were enormous with an almost undetectable blue iris outline. After 11 hours of waiting in the hospital, well into Sunday morning, after having wires and needles put into and taken out of me, I was seen by a psychologist. Fortunately, my skinny jeans had knee slits in them so they could put sticky stuff on my knees, otherwise I might have had to wear one of the dreaded hospital gowns. I've been referred to a rehab center, doctor's surgery, counseling at my university, and a psychiatrist for everything. Moral of the story? I'm sure there's one in there somewhere. I hope no one has to experience something like this. I actually enjoyed the tripping effects. Obviously, I took too much for me. I have a fairly low mass as well, and in the past have shown relatively sensitive reactions to psychedelics when compared with my friends. Actual streams of colors that had bodies, as in defined outlines like riverbanks containing the colors which flowed in multiple directions as a liquid were perceived. This filled the background of my visual field. People looked prettier, smoother. People's faces when close to mid-range away from me were morphing a lot. All objects were breathing. However, this came in waves. I generally felt happier whilst on it. Tracers were seen briefly. I got full-blown hallucinations, usually of other people who weren't there who spoke to me. The trip was quite gentle for a while, but then, for me, it had quite a sudden peak which lasted for a long time. Returning to baseline was slow. I got massive headaches and a harsh come-down Sunday night through Monday night, still washed out and very tired half a week later. Any of these effects could have been mediated by other drugs in my system other than vk-2C-B. However, none of them are typical of any other drugs I was on.